Welcome to Bug Banter with the Xerces Society, where we explore the world of invertebrates and discover how to help these extraordinary animals. If you want to support our work, go to xerces.org/give.
Hello, I'm Matthew Shepard in Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Rachel Dunham in Missoula, Montana.
We're continuing with our series on butterflies, and today we're highlighting the butterflies east of the Rockies, which is a huge area and encompasses so many different environments: prairies in the Great Plains and the Midwest, forests of New England and the Southeast, mountains of the Appalachians, the wetlands and beaches of the Atlantic and the Gulf coasts. To try and cover all of these, we are joined today by Ray Moranz, who you may remember from episode 6 when he talked about the monarch, a butterfly that could be found in any of those areas. Ray is a pollinator conservation specialist and NRCS partner biologist with the Xerces Society and has spent many years studying butterfly and plant communities across the US. Welcome back, Ray.
Great to be here, Matthew. Great to see you, Rachel.
It's great to have you. So to lay the foundation, what are we talking about when we say east of the Rockies, first of all? And then can you give us a sense of the diversity of butterflies that you can find in that region?
Sure. Well, we're talking about everything from Texas, eastern Colorado, eastern Montana, etc., the Great Plains, the High Plains, all the way over to the Atlantic coast. We're focusing on the U.S. today, so but some of what we talk about will be relevant to Ontario and Quebec as well. But yeah, highlighting the central and the eastern U.S., going all the way almost to Denver, but not quite. And you asked about diversity. Diversity of butterflies in this region is pretty high. It's a lot lower than the Amazon, but the Amazon basin of South America has the highest diversity of butterflies in the world. Nobody can quite compete and compare with that. On the other hand, I think, I'm pretty sure it's the case that my county in Oklahoma, or any county of Oklahoma, has more species of butterflies than all of the United Kingdom put together. So yes, our butterfly species richness in central and eastern US is a good deal higher than many places in Europe. And we've got plenty of great butterflies to be proud of and to go out and search for.
Sorry to jump in, Ray. You mentioned the United Kingdom,
Yes.
Close to my heart, home country and all that.
Sorry,
So no, it's fine. I was going to say, because I don't know how many people know how many species there are in that country, and it's 59 or 60. It used to be 59 and now I think it's 60. So that was just to give people a kind of a baseline. Your county in Oklahoma has more than 60 species.
Yes, I knew it was low in the United Kingdom. I thought it was higher than that. Oh my good gosh. And yet, of course, the British have been butterfly enthusiasts for hundreds of years and huge, incredible leaders in the field of butterfly research and all that. But yes, in Payne County, Oklahoma, where I live, I think we can see upwards of around 110 species of butterflies. Oklahoma as a whole, I think it's about, I think between 160 and 170 species of butterflies in the state. Yeah. If you count the things that only occasionally make it here, it would be even higher.
So with the number of butterflies that are in the east, they must vary a lot. Can you tell us what the biggest and the smallest species is?
I can, and I've seen them both. The biggest is the giant swallowtail, and the name says it all. It's a swallowtail, one of those butterflies that's got long, skinny tails like the barn swallow, the bird, and it is colossal. And I do have those on my farm, and beautiful species, primarily black and yellow. At the other end of the scale, we have an interesting contest for the smallest butterfly east of the Rockies. If you had asked what is the smallest butterfly of the eastern United States, 30 years ago, the answer would have been the eastern pygmy blue. Very, very tiny little butterfly. the smallest, but there's a butterfly even smaller than that in the central and western United States, the western pygmy blue. So the answer is the western pygmy blue. And a very interesting thing is that now the western pygmy blue, which was only in the west and in the center, has moved to the east. They've just colonized Tampa Bay in Florida. So now the eastern pygmy blue loses its distinction as the smallest butterfly of the east. The western pygmy blue has arrived and has beaten it out for being even smaller.
And all the way from like the western states to Tampa Bay, is there nothing? No,
we have
records
them here in
between?
Oklahoma. They're
Okay.
in Texas as well. So
Oh.
they didn't have to go all the way from LA or San Diego.
And do they compete directly with the eastern pygmy blue?
That's a great question. I actually do not know. I do not know the host plants of the two species, but that's probably where the competition would be.
And they're not like fighting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Little butterfly fights. So east of the Rockies is a big and diverse region, as Matthew mentioned in the description, get a lot of different types of ecosystems. Does butterfly diversity vary across the eastern U.S.?
Absolutely. There is, I think in general, diversity is a little bit higher in the south than in the north. And there is one very clear hotspot of butterfly biodiversity east of the Rockies, and that is South Texas. So Texas already was going to be a hotspot because of its longitude. It's getting some butterflies from the east that just barely make it into the center. It's got butterflies that are primarily in the central US, and it gets a few butterflies from the west. But then you go down to South Texas, and that's where things get really special. You get a whole bunch of species that are basically Mexican species and just barely cross the Rio Grande into South Texas. And these are some really exotic, tropical, beautiful creatures. So there is a National Butterfly Center right on the American side of the Rio Grande River. And I've been there once, and it was a delightful experience. And at that National Butterfly Center, people make pilgrimage there to see butterflies that they can only see in South Texas and nowhere else in the United States. So that is the ultimate hotspot for butterfly species richness in the lower 48 states.
Sounds like a pretty cool place to go.
It is. It is. It's actually, it's a very hot place to go.
Oh, well, yes.
Here,
hot but cool.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I know in previous episodes, we've heard about how plant diversity is often an indicator of butterfly diversity because of like the close relationship with host plants and so on. I'm assuming that's the same sort of in the eastern US as well, that the presence of the right kind of plants helps drive the butterfly fauna.
Yes, that is a factor. And the southern US does have higher plant species richness than the northern US, with the big hotspots of plant biodiversity being the Florida Panhandle, an area where I used to work. Totally amazing for plant diversity, lots of rare endemic plants. Chesapeake Bay area has very high plant diversity, and then portions of Texas. But the Florida Panhandle is not, though it's a great hotspot of plant biodiversity, it is not a great hotspot of butterfly species richness. It's got some great butterflies, but the butterflies species richness does not match the high plant species richness. So in the east, it's not quite that simple. It's not quite that simple as saying there's a really strong positive correlation between plant species richness and butterfly species richness.
Do you know why that is in Florida? Because I was shocked when you said southern Texas was kind of the main hotspot. I was like, wait, what about Florida? Because you think tropical weather, lots of plant diversity.
I think the thing that Florida has going against it is that it's a peninsula.
That makes sense.
So yeah. There's the peninsula effect reduces the amount of, there are a whole bunch of cool butterflies in Cuba and Jamaica and Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic and Haiti that weren't able to cross the water up into Florida, as opposed to butterflies from North Mexico that are able to cross the Rio Grande into South Texas.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
that makes sense, because it's much easier for a butterfly to fly a short distance
That's right.
than it is to, I mean, the monarch obviously can fly huge distances,
That's right.
but most other butterflies can't.
That's right.
Yeah.
Are there any unique species found in the East and nowhere else?
Unique species found in the East. Sure. A whole bunch. I think, the Diana fritillary. That's a really obvious example. Diana fritillary is a colossal, beautifully colorful butterfly of forests, of the Ozarks and the Appalachians. And it does seem to be moving west, which is fascinating to me. But just a few miles. It used to only be in far eastern Oklahoma, and now people are occasionally seeing them in central Oklahoma, where I live. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of species that are only in the East and not in the West, and vice versa, of course.
Are there any butterflies with notable life histories?
Oh yeah, I mentioned the Diana fritillary a moment ago. Now I'm going to talk about its one of its sibling species, and that is the regal fritillary. And I have been a big fan of the regal fritillary ever since I heard about it in the 90s. And I ended up getting my PhD studying the regal fritillary. The regal fritillary is a large, very colorful butterfly with orange, black and white and purple, silver, quite an attractive species. And it is non-migratory, which is important to note. But what makes it one of the most unusual things about it is that it estivates. The females of that species estivate. Now, estivate is like hibernate, but in the summer. So there are many butterfly species that hibernate. They spend the winter inactive in very cold places. And the regal fritillary does that. But its female estivates. The female comes out of the chrysalis in, let's say, June, early July. It mates. And then, rather than going out and laying eggs, which is what most butterflies would do, it disappears. Where does it disappear? It goes down into the grass and just hides and just waits and sits and waits through much of July and August and early September. And then, let's say September 10th, mid-September, late September, they come out and they lay eggs. And that's really weird. That's really unusual. The other thing that's unusual about their egg laying is how many they lay. 3,000 eggs per female on average. Wow. 3,000. A female monarch lays a lot of eggs. She lays 300. A regal fritillary lays 3,000. 3,000. Supposedly, from what I've read years ago, more eggs than any other butterfly species in the world. Why do they lay so many eggs, you might be wondering? Because they also have the unusual strategy of laying them at random. Now, I don't mean completely at random. I don't mean like they'll lay them in your backyard and in a grocery store parking lot and in a forest and at a lake. They're restricted to prairie, usually very high quality tall grass prairie or mixed grass prairie. But once they're in the proper habitat prairie with violets, because that's the host plant for their caterpillars, they don't lay them on the host plant. They lay them near the host plant, sorta, just out and about in the prairie. And then it's the job of the little caterpillar, the extremely tiny caterpillar that comes out of the egg. It's the job of the caterpillar to find the host plant. And sometimes they might have to crawl 10, 20, 30 feet to find a host plant. You could imagine that a lot of those caterpillars will fail to find the host plant. Therefore, the female has to lay a lot of eggs. It's a strange custom, a strange behavior. You know, as we know, monarchs lay them right on the plant. Most butterflies lay their eggs right on the host plants, but not the regal fritillary. She's got to be different.
So the female fritillary, is she just like flying around, just dropping eggs? Or does
Well,
she?
not dropping them, but I've watched this and it was a real treat. She drops. She'll be hovering, flying very slowly above the prairie, maybe 3 foot off the ground, and then all of a sudden she falls down near the ground, lays an egg on a blade of grass or on a shrub or what have you.
Okay.
And then she gets up and goes 10 or 20 or 30 feet and drops. Again, seemingly traveling at random, leaving her eggs in the midst of the violets, but not on the violets.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm still thinking about this. I mean, it's a lot of effort to drop and lay an egg, but just sort of close-ish.
Yes, it is.
But I'm also, I mean, I know violets are typically pretty short plants, low growing, and this is tall grass prairie, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. So the violets plant must be difficult to see amongst the grass.
A lot of the time, the violets are hidden under the grass. If the grass hasn't been burned in years, if the prairie hasn't been burned, they'll literally be underneath the litter.
Yeah.
Trapped in it, but the caterpillars can find it.
Do we know how the caterpillars know which direction? Because you pop out of an egg and do you look around and sniff? I mean, how do they know which direction to go in? Or is that because there's 3,000 and only 10 of them survive? You know,
I cannot answer that. And in fact, I have never seen a regal fritillary caterpillar. Never. In part because of this. You know, I'm in prairies with many violets, and it's really hard to find the caterpillars.
Oh, yeah, because they'll be tiny. Yeah,
they're tiny, and it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. But I do know people who have done research on the caterpillars. They've seen them, and they might be able to answer that. But I have no answer to that at this point.
That's all right. No worries. I just had to ask.
I think I understand why she rests for a few months before laying her eggs between the number she's preparing to lay and then dropping.
Supposedly, another reason why she would estivate, why she would hide in the middle of summer, is because the violets, to some degree, go dormant in the middle of summer when it's super hot. You know, we here in Oklahoma, typical summer day is 100, 105 degrees with low humidity. And the violets don't like that, but then they come back up in the fall. And so the female, I think that's probably the main reason why they have evolved that behavior, is to avoid the horrible heat of midsummer in Oklahoma.
So this is the point in the podcast where we get down to population decline, talking about how butterflies are doing. So I heard about a study that they did in the state of Ohio, and they found that the abundance of butterflies is in decline 2% per year, which is a lot. Is that true for other states that you know of? And are there any species of particular concern?
Well, certainly that Ohio study measure is similar to a study out west by Matt Forrester and his team, showing widespread declines in butterflies out west. I personally am not aware of other similar studies in the East, similar to the Ohio study. But yeah, the Ohio study is quite worrisome, and that this could be happening. You know, my assumption is that this is happening region-wide, that many states are suffering in the eastern and central U.S. are suffering major declines in butterflies from year to year. And I looked at that paper, and some of the species that are declining, one of them, the American copper, a beautiful little thing. That's one of the butterflies that got me to like butterflies when I was a little boy growing up outside of Rochester, New York. And I'm pretty certain I saw that beautiful little American copper in my backyard, which is a sort of average suburban lot. And to hear that it's declined very substantially, it was really, really pains me. Another butterfly that's declined quite a bit is the Baltimore. That's the butterfly I saw as an undergraduate in Ithaca, New York, but I haven't seen it since. Now, I haven't lived in that part of the country in decades, but I've heard other people report how the Baltimore butterfly has declined quite a bit. So it's very sad to see that corroborated by data from the Ohio study, and of course, monarchs. The Ohio study does show a decline in monarchs, and many of us have seen that in our careers, and it's painful to see.
Yeah, because if it is a 2% decline, that only takes 20 years for like a third of the butterflies to have gone.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. What about the next 20 or 40 years?
So we also talk about this often on this show, but what's causing these declines? And on the flip side of that, are there any stories of hope? Is there, are there any species that are doing any better, that are expanding numbers or moving to new areas? You've mentioned that a little bit.
Yeah, causes of decline first. The one I always focus on most is habitat loss. And we keep on losing habitat through conversion of native ecosystem to croplands, conversion of native ecosystems or semi-native ecosystems to urban, suburban, and exurban development. So that's huge. Changes of land management are huge. I am a big proponent of prescribed fire. I conduct prescribed fire on the farm, the 10-acre farm that my wife and I live on here in Oklahoma. And I know from experience that it helps improve habitat, but there are huge expanses of the central and eastern US that haven't had prescribed fire in a long, long time. And they're getting choked with too many cedar trees or too many red maples back in the east. So basically, habitat conversion through poor management is a big problem. Pesticides are research by the Xerces Society and others are showing pesticides. More and more evidence that pesticides are a factor, particularly insecticides, of course. So those are to me the biggest threats. Climate change got to be having an impact as well. Oddly enough, it's climate change that I can cite, which is probably causing some of the interesting increases of range by some butterflies. And one of the butterflies that I was fascinated to learn that has expanded its range is the giant swallowtail, that largest butterfly in North America. I learned this while I was preparing to deliver a webinar on the butterflies of Vermont. I've never seen a butterfly in Vermont, but I was happy to give the webinar anyway. It's a beautiful state, and it gave me a chance to learn about the butterflies of Vermont through some reading. And in my reading, I discovered that giant swallowtails now have colonized Vermont, and now they've gotten into Canada. Right. And part of this seems to be due to an expansion of their host plant northward, but also probably just warmer temperatures is allowing the butterfly to survive further north.
There's been this northward movement and range expansion. How far north were they previously recorded? I mean, Vermont seemed a long way north. Were they in New York or?
I believe there were. I never saw them there growing up, and I'm pretty sure. Yes, I think they've moved, but I think they've expanded their range about 200 miles.
Yeah, wow.
Which is quite a bit.
Yeah.
Another I mentioned earlier, the Diana fritillary seems to be expanding its range westward at least a little bit here in Oklahoma, which is strange, hard to understand. And then there's a butterfly in Florida, which almost went extinct, the Florida Atala butterfly. People started planting its host plant, which is the Kunti plant. It is a cycad. The scientific name is Zamia pumla. People started planting that in their gardens and lawns because it's attractive. They didn't know it's the host plant of the Florida Atala, but it greatly benefited the Atala. So this butterfly, which used to be only in southeastern Florida, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Miami, now has expanded over to the Tampa area. So the Tampa area has picked up a couple species, the Western Pygmy Blue and the Florida Atala. So that is a surprising expansion of its range. Now, back to the sad side, we'll talk about that Regal fritillary. I didn't mention earlier that this wonderful species that I did my PhD research, it has disappeared entirely from 13 states. Disappeared entirely. Now, much of that happened, most of those extirpations occurred over 50 years ago, but so are not recent, but still really sobering to realize how this gorgeous species used to be in New York, New Jersey, Ohio, and has disappeared from most of the East.
I'm jumping to conclusions here, but I'm imagining that's agriculture and pesticides, you know.
Yes, loss of natural open areas. So to some degree, woody plant encroachment due to a lack of fire, but probably mainly due to conversion to crops and urban or urban areas. And what really hit home to me was when my former mentor, Professor Lincoln Brower, renowned as a monarch expert, told me about seeing Regal fritillaries where he grew up in New Jersey when he was a boy in the 1940s. And it's been a long time since they've been in New Jersey. So sad.
Wow. I mean, we always like to try and leave our listeners with a bit of hope.
That's right.
Some ideas about what they can do to help, because I know in our line of work, it's so easy to get caught in a kind of a doom cycle, you know, because there's always bad news, and we, you know, there's always good news too, but balancing out is not always easy. So yeah, we know that butterflies need plants, you know, the right kind of plants. And if you live in the Midwest and had room for, say, only one host plant and one nectar plant, what do you think there would be? I mean, and similarly, if you're in the Northeast or South Central or the Southeast, do you have simple guidance like that?
I do. And of course, the Xerces Society has long lists of plants for pollinators and plants for monarchs on our website. But if I were to choose just one of each for each area, I think in the Midwest, I'd probably go with a milkweed, probably common milkweed, butterfly milkweed, or swamp milkweed, because all three of those, in addition to helping monarch caterpillars, they're also producing nectar for monarchs and many other butterflies. And then if folks listening are from the Midwest or the Northeast, if you don't know about a plant called Anise hyssop, you should go to the store and get some Anise hyssop. It's in the genus Agastache. I'm forgetting the specific epithet at the moment. But Anise hyssop, it is pretty, it is easy to grow, it smells great, and it will be covered with butterflies and bees for months. For a perennial, it blooms for a very long time. So Anise hyssop is a great nectar plant for the North in general. The Northeast, I'd also pick a milkweed as the host plant. For the nectar plant, I would pick slender mountain mint. Now, slender mountain mint also occurs in the Midwest. Mountain mints, any mountain mint in the genus Pycnanthemum gets covered with bees and butterflies and other pollinators while it blooms. In the Southeast, that was a little tougher for me to decide. I think for a host plant, I will go with prickly ash in the genus Xanthoxylum. It is a small tree. And it is one of the host plants for the giant swallowtail, that largest butterfly of North America. And in my experience, if you have some prickly ash or any other plants in that family that are native to the US, you will have giant swallowtail caterpillars. And they are really fun caterpillars because they look like giant bird turds. They're huge and they really do look like bird droppings. And that almost certainly is a defense, a strategy to help make them look unappealing to predators. As far as the nectar plant in the Southeast, snow square stem, let's go with snow square stem, Melanthera nivea. I know I used to see that when I lived in Gainesville, Florida, and I was visiting my mother-in-law there multiple times in the last year. And wow, plenty of things visiting Melanthera nivea, snow square stem. Beautiful white flowers, easy to grow. Where I live in the South Central US, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and neighboring states. For the host plant, I'll go with passion flower, because if you grow passion flower in the genus Passiflora, you will have caterpillars on it, including variegated fritillaries and Gulf fritillaries. And matter of fact, I planted some passion flower at a pollinator garden recently, and we had while we were planting it, 3 minutes after we had the plant in the ground, there was a female variegated fritillary laying eggs on it. And I'm not exaggerating. And I was at this garden 2 days ago, and the caterpillars had almost eaten it to the ground. So that's how good of a host plant passion flower is. As far as the nectar plant, people who know me know I'm obsessed with a plant called golden crownbeard, Verbicina encelioides. Pretty yellow flowers, easy to grow as long as you have well-drained soil. And it blooms from April until frost. So it's feeding butterflies and other pollinators from April until frost. Easy choice for me.
That's
Wow,
great.
thank you
Thank
for all
you.
those.
You're welcome.
Just thinking, you know a lot about a lot, Ray. All these different plants in such a large region.
I've lived all over. So
Well, we're
I'm
lucky
an
to
everywhere man, right? That's the song.
exactly. Well, we're lucky to have you at Xerces. I know you're just a wealth of knowledge and information, and this has been really wonderful. So we have a different question to end on because you've already answered our first one that we asked. What is the most memorable experience you've had with an invertebrate?
Oh boy. That's a tough one. I've had a lot of great times with bugs. I remember vividly being out in the field as a new graduate student at the University of Florida with Lincoln Brower, the world's greatest expert on the monarch. And I took him out to one of my field sites, an area where he had never been. And he was so much fun to be with because he would get so excited by just about everything in nature. And where I took him was an area full of biting flies, deer flies, and mosquitoes, and it had water moccasins and alligators and oppressive heat and humidity. It was a dangerous place with a lot of hazards. And yet walking through this swampy area in an uninhabited region of the Gulf Coast of Florida, we came upon a tiny patch of white flowers, tiny little white flowers, named Turkey Tanglefoot is the name of the plant. And in that tiny patch of flowers, about the size of a typical children's bedroom, we saw 75 queens, which are beautiful chestnut brown butterflies, and 200 great southern whites, which are large, brilliant white butterflies with blue antennae, turquoise blue antennae, antennal knobs. And to see this bubbling mass of chestnut brown and white all together, we were just transfixed by the beauty. And to think that that was just in some swamp in Florida that not many people ever visit. But if you search, you will find some wonderful things. The heat and humidity, especially the humidity of the eastern US, is really beneficial to our butterflies. And I know Rachel and Matthew are both, Matthew lives in the Portland area. Rachel grew up in the Portland area. I see more butterflies on my farm in Oklahoma in 1 hour than I'll see in 2 weeks in Portland, Oregon area. So, which is not to put down Portland, Oregon, but it's to let people know that we have very special, we got a lot of butterflies in the Eastern US still, especially in the South. But also in the North as well, but especially if you want to see a lot of butterflies, you could still go to places with a lot of butterflies down here in Oklahoma and in Arkansas and in rugged places of Florida and Alabama and Tennessee. So I think there should be more tourism to this region for butterflies, to be honest.
I was just thinking I have to go visit.
Same.
Well, come on down, please.
Well, thank you for painting that beautiful picture for us, Ray. And thank you again for joining us and talking about some butterflies other than monarchs. We love monarchs, but we love other butterflies too. And I think you gave us just such a really great idea of the diversity and just curiosity. I'm so curious now that I want to go learn more, which is really wonderful. So we hope to have you back again. I'm sure we will at some point. But thank you again for joining us. We hope you enjoyed your time.
I really did.
Bug Banter is brought to you by the Xerces Society, a donor-supported nonprofit that is working to protect insects and other invertebrates, the life that sustains us. If you're already a donor, thank you so much. If you want to support our work, go to xerces.org/donate. For information about this podcast and show notes, go to xerces.org/bugbanter.